What does it really mean to be free? Most of us think it's about open skies, endless choices, and the ability to do whatever we want. But the Shawshank Redemption gives us a very different answer. It shows us a man locked away for a crime he didn't commit, trapped inside one of the bleakest prisons imaginable, yet somehow, he finds more freedom than most of us ever will. When Andy Dufresne first walked into Shawshank, everyone thought he'd crumble. A quiet banker, dressed in a suit, with no experience of the brutal world he was stepping into. Inmates whispered that he wouldn't last a week. To the other inmates, he's already a dead man walking. Nobody expects him to last. Instead of breaking, Andy does something nobody sees coming. And it's not strength, or violence, or even luck that saves him. It's something much harder, something most of us avoid at all costs. And that's the part of the story that changes how you see your own life. Andy Dufresne was a successful banker, smart, quiet, and disciplined, the kind of man who lived life by order and logic. But none of that mattered the night he was accused of murdering his wife and her lover. The evidence stacked up against him looked airtight. The jury didn't hesitate, and just like that, his life was over. 2 consecutive life sentences in Shawshank Prison. Now, put yourself in Andy's shoes for a second. One moment, you're building a career and a future. The next, you're dragged into a nightmare you can't escape. You didn't do it. You know you didn't do it. But none of that matters anymore. The world has already judged you guilty. Most people, when faced with that kind of injustice, would rage. They'd curse the system. They'd crumble under the weight of despair. And maybe you felt a version of that too. Times when life blindsided you with something you didn't deserve. Betrayal, failure, tragedy, and you had no control over it. That's Andy's starting point. A man trapped in a story he never chose. And the haunting question isn't why it happened, but what he'll do with it. Because how you respond when life hands you the unbearable, that's what defines you. The first days in Shawshank are designed to break you. The guards strip you down, humiliate you, and remind you at every turn that you are nothing. The prisoners stare at you like predators sizing up fresh prey. Most new arrivals crack within hours, crying, screaming, begging for it to be over. Everyone thought Andy would be the first. He wasn't tough, he wasn't loud, he wasn't the kind of man who looked like he belonged behind bars. Quiet men rarely survive in a place built on violence. And yet, Andy didn't crack. He didn't beg. He didn't even raise his voice. He carried himself with the same calm he had on the outside, as if Shawshank hadn't touched him at all. That calm unnerved people. To the guards, it was strange. To the inmates, it was unsettling. They expected fear, but Andy gave them silence. They expected rage, but Andy gave them composure. And here's where the lesson starts to creep in. Most of us believe that when life corners us, we only have 2 options: fight back in anger or collapse in despair. Andy shows us a third path. He doesn't control Shawshank. He doesn't control the guards or the walls or the brutal fate handed to him. But he does control himself. And that choice, to remain steady when everything pushes you to collapse, would become his quiet superpower. But Shawshank wasn't just walls and guards. It had predators, men who hunted the weak, and Andy quickly became a target. They were known as the Sisters, and for years they cornered him, humiliated him, and left scars that no one on the outside would ever see. Most men would have broken under that kind of torment. Many did. But Andy, he endured it. He didn't fight with rage, and he didn't collapse into hopelessness. He endured and he waited. Now, that's not to romanticize his suffering. There was nothing noble about what he went through. But Andy revealed something most of us forget. Pain is inevitable, but despair is optional. Life will bring you moments you can't avoid. Loss, betrayal, heartbreak, injustice. You don't get to choose whether they happen. You only get to choose how you'll carry them. And Andy carried his pain with silence and patience. Every attack he survived was another lesson in endurance. Every day he refused to give up was proof that Shawshank could bruise his body, but it couldn't touch his mind. It's the same for us. The storms in life aren't fair, and they're rarely our fault. But Stoicism reminds us, when you can't control the storm, you can still control the sailor. Something remarkable happened as the years went on. Andy, the quiet banker who was supposed to collapse, began to change the world around him. It started small. On the prison roof, while tarring shingles under the scorching sun, Andy overheard a guard complaining about taxes. Most inmates would have stayed silent, but Andy, with his calm voice, offered a solution. Legal advice that saved the guard money, That single moment bought him and his friends an afternoon of cold beers under the summer sky. For a brief hour, the men felt like free men again, and it was Andy who gave them that. Then it grew bigger. He began helping guards with their finances. He started assisting the warden with his accounts. And slowly, his value spread through Shawshank, not because he fought or demanded respect, but because he found ways to contribute. And this is where Andy's philosophy reveals itself. In a place designed to strip away your humanity, he chose to give it back. He reminded men who had long forgotten what freedom felt like that dignity could still exist, even behind bars. The Stoics believed you should focus not on what you've lost, but on what you can still give. Andy embodied that. He couldn't control his sentence, but he could control whether Shawshank was just a prison or the beginning of something more. Most men in Shawshank passed their years by counting them. Andy spent his by building. What started as simple financial advice soon turned into something greater, a dream for a library. At first, it seemed impossible. Shawshank was a place for punishment, not learning. But Andy began writing letters, one a week, every week, to the state government, requesting funds and books. The guards laughed at him. The inmates thought he was wasting his time, but Andy never stopped. Week after week, letter after letter, for 6 years. And then, one day, the state gave in. A shipment of books, some tattered, some new, arrived at Shawshank. To anyone else, it was just paperwork. To Andy, it was the beginning of freedom. With time, the library grew, expanding into the best prison library in New England. Men who had once given up on life found themselves reading, learning, even earning diplomas. Think about that. In a place designed to kill hope, Andy created an engine of growth. And that's the Stoic secret. When life gives you a prison, build something inside it that no one can take away. Andy turned Shawshank into a place of transformation, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. The lesson here is simple but profound. You can endure suffering by giving it meaning. If Andy could create a library out of stone walls and despair, then maybe your own setbacks carry the raw materials for something greater too. Among the men Andy touched, none mattered more than Ellis "Red" Redding. Red was the man who could get things inside. Cigarettes, posters, even a rock hammer if you had the patience to wait. But more than that, Red was the voice of realism in Shawshank. He didn't believe in dreams. He believed in serving his time and surviving day by day. At first, Andy and Red seemed like opposites. Andy was unshakable, always carrying an invisible spark of hope. Red had learned not to expect anything, because disappointment inside Shawshank could crush a man. Hope is a dangerous thing, he warned Andy. It can drive a man insane. But Andy didn't agree. To him, hope wasn't a weakness, it was a form of freedom. And slowly, through their friendship, he began to show Red what that meant. When Andy played Mozart over the prison loudspeakers, for example, every inmate froze. For a few minutes, the walls didn't exist. They weren't locked away. They were simply men, listening to something beautiful, Red later admitted. For the briefest of moments, every man in Shawshank felt free. That was Andy's gift. He didn't just endure, he reminded others what it felt like to be human. And this is where Stoicism meets something larger. Stoics teach us to control our inner world, to be steady no matter what. But Andy shows us that inner strength can ignite hope in others too. Sometimes the best way to survive isn't to retreat inward, but to share that spark outward. From the outside, Andy's life looked ordinary. He spent his days doing taxes for guards, helping the warden, running the library. To the other inmates, he seemed almost boring. But what they didn't see was that Andy was slowly building an invisible kind of power, the power of small, consistent habits. In his cell at night, Andy chipped away at the wall with that tiny rock hammer Red had smuggled in. Just a few flakes of dust at a time, nothing dramatic, nothing anyone would notice. He carved chess pieces from stone, teaching himself patience. He wrote letters, week after week, until funding came through for the library. And when he played music, he reminded his mind that the world was bigger than Shawshank's walls. This was Andy's resilience. It didn't come from loud rebellion or sudden breakthroughs. It came from daily discipline, from choosing small actions that built into something greater. Stoicism isn't about ignoring suffering. It's about learning how to outlast it, one day at a time. And isn't that the same in life outside the prison? No one transforms overnight. You don't suddenly become strong, or wise, or free. You become it by carving away at your own walls. day after day. Most people miss this because it doesn't look dramatic. But as Andy proved, it's the quiet, invisible work that shapes the biggest escapes. For nearly 2 decades, Andy lived as though Shawshank would be his forever home. He kept his head down, played his role, built the library, balanced the warden's books, and carried himself with quiet dignity. To everyone watching, it looked like acceptance, maybe even surrender. But Andy was playing a longer game. On one stormy night, the truth finally surfaced. Andy's cell was empty, gone. The guards tore through Shawshank, certain he must be hiding somewhere. But when they pulled back that Rita Hayworth poster, they didn't find Andy, they found a tunnel. A tunnel he had been carving, handful by handful, for 19 years. Think about that. Almost 2 decades of patience, of quiet labor, of working on something no one else could see. And in one night, Andy crawled through 500 yards of filth and darkness to earn back the life that had been stolen from him. It wasn't just an escape, it was a rebirth. The man who went into Shawshank was a quiet banker, sentenced to die. The man who came out was unbreakable, free, not just in body, but in spirit. And here's the deeper truth. Andy didn't escape because he dreamed of freedom one night. He escaped because he built freedom every single day he was imprisoned. By carving that tunnel, by carving chess pieces, by carving hope into everyone he touched, he rebuilt his identity long before he stepped outside those walls. And that's what Stoicism is about. It's not passively accepting your fate. It's actively shaping who you become, no matter where you are trapped. Andy's escape wasn't luck. It wasn't fate. It was built, slowly, deliberately, out of small choices he made every single day. And that's where Shawshank stops being just a story and starts becoming a mirror. Because your life may not be a prison, but we all live inside walls of some kind. Fear, habits, comfort zones. The only way out is to chip at them, piece by piece. So what does that look like outside the movie? First, journal what you can control and what you can't. Most of us waste endless energy raging against things we'll never change. Traffic, the economy, other people's opinions. Writing it down forces you to separate the storm from the sailor. It shows you where your effort actually matters. Second, practice daily discomfort. Andy faced suffering he didn't choose, but you can train yourself by choosing small challenges. Cold showers, hard workouts, honest conversations you've been avoiding. Each time you lean into discomfort, you remind yourself that pain isn't the end of you. Third, replace complaint with contribution. Andy built a library in a prison. What's your library? Instead of asking, why me? Ask, what can I build here? Maybe it's helping someone else. Maybe it's developing a skill. Maybe it's taking one step toward the life you actually want. None of these habits look dramatic in the moment, but neither did Andy chipping at his cell wall. And over time, they carve out freedom where despair used to live. Because here's the truth. The walls around you might not fall overnight, but every choice you make to master yourself is one strike closer to the day they do.